All right, let me ask you something a little out there. What if the very same things that make a company successful could actually be the secret to a thriving relationship? It sounds kind of weird, right? But it might just be the blueprint we've all been searching for.
Now, I know exactly what you're probably thinking. Run my relationship like a company? You mean spreadsheets? Performance reviews? Yeah, it sounds super cold and impersonal. But just hang with me for a minute, because this has nothing to do with being all corporate and stuffy. It's actually all about being intentional. So, the ideas we're going to be diving in today, they all come from this really fascinating book, Sacred Communications by Abishua. And in it, he lays out this concept he calls the marriage governance framework. And the whole point, the whole goal, is to take that kind of clarity and purpose that makes a great organization tick and bring it right into the heart of a marriage.
Okay, so let's dig into this surprising blueprint. First things first, this is not a rigid set of corporate rules. Not at all. It's much better to think of it as, well, a blueprint. You wouldn't dream of building a house without a plan, right? This framework is that plan. It gives you the structure you need to build a relationship that's strong enough to weather, pretty much any storm.
So, what is this marriage governance framework really? Well, at its core, it's a system for guiding how you communicate and make decisions together, all based on principles you've both agreed on. It's kind of like creating your own personal mission statement as a couple, or your own set of company values designed to make sure you're both on the same page and, pulling in the same direction.
So where do you even start with a blueprint like this? Well, it all begins with the first big principle. See, in any successful company, you absolutely have to know who your primary stakeholder is, the most important person. And this framework says the exact same thing is true for a marriage. And figuring that out, that's step one.
And that primary stakeholder, it's pretty obvious, right? It's your spouse. The book says it so well. Your spouse must remain your primary earthly priority. And when that is crystal clear, when your partner feels like the number one priority, something amazing happens. All of a sudden, communication starts to feel safe, the walls come down, the defensiveness drops, and you can actually be vulnerable with each other.
Okay, but what does making your partner a priority actually look like in real life? Because it's not just some abstract idea, right? It comes down to real, everyday actions. Things like fiercely guarding your time together, like actually putting your phone down and giving them your undivided attention when they're talking. And this last one, this one is huge. Defending them in public, but then addressing any issues you have in private. It's all about showing that you are a team, a united front.
Okay, so your spouse is the primary stakeholder. Got it. So what's the most valuable asset you two share, the thing that everything else is built on? Well, according to this framework, it's trust. And I love this part. It asks you to think about trust like it's a kind of currency.
And look at how this is broken down. It's brilliant. Trust isn't just one big thing. It's split into 4 different accounts. You've got your promise account. Do you actually do what you say you're going to do? Then there's confidentiality. Can they tell you anything knowing it's safe? Consistency. Are you the same person behind closed doors as you are in public? And finally, character. Do your actions actually line up with your values? See? Every time you keep a promise, that's a deposit. And every time you break one, that's a withdrawal.
So what happens when you make a withdrawal? Because let's be real, we're all human. It's going to happen. The great thing is the framework gives you a clear 4-step process for making repairs. It's not about being perfect. It's about knowing how to fix it when you mess up. First, you acknowledge what you did, specifically, and with 0 excuses. Then, a real apology, where you take responsibility. Then you try to make amends, and this is key. You ask them what you can do to make it right. And finally, you rebuild. And that happens over time with consistent, trustworthy actions. It's a roadmap back.
All right, so when you put all this together, making your partner a priority, building up that trust currency, it all creates something. It creates the day-to-day environment of your relationship. And just like every company has a culture, this framework says every single relationship has one too. It's basically the emotional climate of your home.
And this chart just lays it out so clearly, doesn't it? On one side, you have a healthy culture. It feels like respect, gentleness, warmth, emotional safety. You feel like you can breathe. And on the other side, you've got contempt, criticism, sarcasm, that horrible feeling of walking on eggshells. The thing we'll remember is neither of these happen by accident. They're built one tiny, everyday interaction at a time. So how do you actively build that healthy culture? Well, the book points to some amazing research from Dr. John Gottman. He found this almost like a magic ratio for happy relationships, and it's this: 5-to-1. For every 1 negative interaction, stable couples have at least 5 positive ones. Think about that.
5 to 1. And it makes so much sense, right? All those positive moments build up this emotional bank account, this buffer, so that when conflict does happen, you have enough goodwill to handle it without the whole thing collapsing.
Okay, this brings us to our last big idea from the framework. And I'll admit, this one might be the most businessy sounding one of all. It's the concept of a relationship audit. I know, it sounds like a performance review for your love life, but trust me, it's way more powerful than that.
And the logic behind it is just so simple, but so true. What gets measured gets managed. What gets reviewed gets improved. That's it right there. Instead of just letting little annoyances build up and fester until they explode into a huge fight, this is about being proactive. It's about regularly checking the pulse of your relationship to keep it healthy.
So how do you actually do one of these audits? Well, the process is pretty straightforward. First, you schedule it, put it on the calendar, and treat it like it's unbreakable. Then you create safety. No phones, no TV, a time when you're not exhausted. When you talk, you use I feel statements, so it's about your experience, not blaming them. And the most important rule of all, your number one job is to listen to understand, not to argue or defend yourself. The goal here isn't to win. It's to walk away with 1 or 2 small, actionable things you can both work on.
And if you're thinking, okay, but what would we even talk about? The book gives you some fantastic starting questions. And you'll notice they're not about finding fault. They're all about connecting and growing. Like, when did we feel most connected lately? Or, how has our communication been, really? But man, that last one is a game changer. What is one thing I could do to be a better partner to you? Imagine asking and truly listening to the answer to that.
So when you boil it all down, the main idea is incredibly simple. What you are intentional about improves. Running your relationship like a company was never about being cold or corporate. It's about caring enough to give it the focus, the structure, and the attention it deserves to actually flourish. So I'll just leave you with this to think about. The book argues that what gets reviewed gets improved. So what's one part of your relationship that's worth reviewing?